Hello, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Casey Reese, and I am an educator here at Wonders of Wildlife National Museum and Aquarium here in Springfield, Missouri. How is everyone doing? If you guys want to write in the comments where you guys are located at, that would be awesome, just so we know where our viewers are from. So welcome to week 2 of our bat awareness mission conservation mission. So if you want to play our mission through Agents of Discovery, all you need to do is log on to www.wondersofwildlife.org/mission-conservation. And on that website, you will find out how to download our Agents of Discovery app. So you will find a box that has the app, and you will hit the download button. And then you can scroll down a little bit farther and you will find the triggers that you need to print out for the mission. So if you go to print triggers, then all you have to do is print out the triggers. You can take it outside and go play outside. You can even play on your computer if you don't have a printer. All you need is a smartphone and to download the app. So to find our current mission, all you need to do is scroll all the way down on the website. So just keep scrolling all the way down until you find schedule of missions and activities. This month is our bat awareness. So you will find our Agent Oz. And this is how you can see what our mission is about. And then you can even unlock our activity guide. So we have indoor and outdoor activities for you guys to play. So on top of that, we have also uploaded a new really awesome Snapchat filter. So that will be on our mission. Whenever you are finished with the mission, then all you have to do is download that Snapchat filter once you've completed the mission, and then you get a really awesome bat Snapchat filter. So with us today, we have two really awesome partners. Our first one is going to be Jordi, and he's from the Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperation. So Jordi, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me. You ready for me to start talking about bats?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll take it away. Again, thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to talk about bats. I'm just mostly going to talk about just sharing some facts about bats, because they're just such cool, fascinating creatures, but they are very, very poorly understood. So I always enjoy just talking about kind of what we consider the bat basics, and there's just so much to learn. So as Casey said, I work for the Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative, and we are a Canadian-based organization that, as our name suggests, focuses on wildlife health. Because health of wildlife goes so much further than just focusing on the diseases that wildlife may have. There's a lot of other threats that wildlife are facing as well. So my role in this organization is to coordinate our national program in which we try to mitigate the disease white nose syndrome. So I'll briefly talk about that towards the end of my talk as well. But let's get into some fun stuff first. So when people think about bats, they might think that a bat is a bat and that's about it, and that there's just one type of bat. But really, there are actually over 1,400 different species of bats. And I believe we have an image that just shows you a bit of the diversity of the faces of bats. So these are just 25 close-up photos of just some of the bat species that I have encountered. So again, like more than 1,400 different species of bats. That means that they actually are among, they're the second largest group of mammals. Only rodents have a larger diversity than bats do. And so about 1 in 5, or about 20% of all mammals are actually bats. So that's pretty impressive. And having so many different species of bats living basically all around the world, they come in different shapes and sizes. So here, I think it'll be cool to see what I have on my screen here, or not on my screen, what I am showing here. So the smallest of all the bats is the bumblebee bat, and it's called that way because it's just so small that its body is literally the size of a bumblebee, and then there's these cute little wings attached to it. So smallest bat here, it weighs only about 2 grams, which is roughly 1/10 of an ounce. So they hardly weigh anything. Now, that is the smallest bat species, but there's also the largest bat species in the world. So take a moment to think about what you think the largest bat species in the world would look like, how big it would be. Now, I'm going to have to move back to show that to you because it doesn't fit on the screen otherwise. So the biggest bat species in the world is the Malayan flying fox. And this is roughly its size. So as you can see, that is the same as my arm span. They have a wingspan of 2 meters or about 6 feet. They are really giants among bats. Now, as I mentioned, bats are poorly understood. A lot of people are afraid of bats for all the wrong reasons, really. And then the funny thing is with these really big bats that people might think, oh, those are really scary. They're all actually vegetarians. They eat fruit. So you don't have to worry about them. As I mentioned, bats live basically all around the world, except for the far north, really the high Arctic, and they don't live on Antarctica. There's a couple of offshore islands very far in the ocean that bats never made it to, but there are exceptions to that as well, because there's even bats living on Hawaii. They made it all the way from mainland North America to Hawaii. So that's very, very impressive. And I am going to talk about mostly Canadian bat species, but before I do, I want to talk about the Mexican free-tailed bats. Now, if you tuned in here last Tuesday, you would have heard a little bit about Mexican free-tailed bats already. I just think they are so cool because Mexican free-tailed bats are basically make the largest congregation of mammals anywhere in the world. So this video here shows you these bats coming out of Bracken Cave. So this is a cave in Texas. The property is managed by Bat Conservation International, one of our partners. And as you can see, there's literally a tornado of bats coming out of this cave. So I was lucky enough to travel here a couple of years ago and take this video. There are 20 million bats living in this cave. And the majority of that is mother bats. The females, they all congregate here. They roost there every summer and they give birth to their pups. So baby bats are called pups, which I think is very, very cute. So I just wanted to show that to you, that a lot of bats are very, very social creatures. And this is kind of the ultimate example of that. 20 million mother bats with their pups roosting together there. And it's just such a sight to see. If you ever have the chance to go to Texas, I recommend that you visit this site or any of the other sites where many Mexican free-tailed bats emerge from. But I'm from Canada, so let's talk a little bit about some of the Canadian species. In Canada, we have about 18 bat species. While bats around the world eat different things, like I mentioned, the really big bats, the Malayan flying fox, they are fruit bats, they eat fruit. But the tiny little bumblebee bat, along with all Canadian bat species, the bumblebee bat, by the way, is not from Canada. This is a species from Thailand. But all of our species, they all eat insects. But around the world, we have bats that eat nectar as well. We have bats that drink blood, that exclusively live off of blood from from mammals or from birds. There's even bats that are carnivores that eat rodents or birds. And then there's a cool bat that we actually have in Western North America from California, even a little bit into British Columbia in Canada. There's the pallet bat that specializes in hunting giant centipedes and scorpions. So imagine this battle between a bat and a scorpion. And the scorpion is actually immune to the venom, the bat is immune to the venom of the scorpion. So that's like a superhero thing right there. So among these 18 species of bats, we do have the pellet bat as well. But basically all of our other bat species, the ones that are much more common, they all eat insects. And so insects, think about animals like mosquitoes, moths, and beetles. So we gotta like bats for that reason, because bats eat a lot of mosquitoes and black flies and no-seams, all of these insects that suck our blood. So they kind of keep the populations of these insects down, and that keeps us more healthy. Now, all the moths and the beetles that these bats eat, that means that they eat a lot of the insects that eat our agricultural crops, our lettuce and our tomatoes and our potatoes. And actually in North America, bats are saving us about, if not more than $3.7 billion every year by eating all of these insects and keeping our crops safe. Now, you've probably known that bats are nocturnal. That means that they are awake at night and they sleep during the day. And they hunt these tiny little insects, which would be very hard to do if it's dark. Now, it's not true that bats are blind. All bats can see, but they don't see particularly well when it's completely dark. So they have echolocation, something really cool that they use to basically make sounds that the humans can't even hear. And these sounds bounce against objects and against insects back to the bat, and they can make this mental image in their mind. And by doing that, they know exactly where the insect is and they can just catch it mid-flight. So that's really, really cool. Now, bats actually do need warm temperatures. So especially in Canada, but also in the north of the United States, you basically only see bats in the summer if you are lucky enough to be outside at night and it's not too dark to see them. So if you tuned in last week, you would have heard about bat migration, that a lot of bats, they go south in the winter and they come back up north in the summer. But many of our bats have a different strategy and they actually hibernate. So they go into caves and mines or other places underground where it doesn't freeze in the winter. It's pretty cold, but it never freezes there. So they can actually stay there and they can save energy, kind of like a winter sleep, until it's summer again and the insects are out, and then you'd be able to see bats again, and that's when they eat. Now, despite bats really liking warmer temperatures, we do in Canada have bats all the way up into Labrador and the Northwest Territories and the Yukon Territory. But the interesting thing too is in summer that it hardly ever gets dark there. The nights are very, very short. So they do get to enjoy that there's a little bit of warmth in the summer, but they have very, very short nights to actually find food. So very, very challenging life. But just to indicate how far north, they don't make it all the way to the Arctic, but they do live pretty far north in Canada. So I want to show you a couple of the bats that we have in Canada. Unfortunately, they're not alive. But here are some taxidermied specimens. So they were alive at one point. So this here is called a hoary bat, and that refers to the hoarfrost on the back, his beautiful white fur. And compared to that biggest bat in the world that has a 6 feet wingspan, this is actually the biggest bat in Canada. So they don't really get very big. They're hardly bigger than a mouse, really. The wings make them look a little bit bigger than they really are. But yeah, pretty tiny bats. So, but these are able to eat some bigger moths and some bigger beetles and those sorts of things. Now, another bat that we have in Canada, another migratory species, is the eastern red bat. That's red with R-E-D, because it refers to its fur. You can see that it's kind of orangey or reddish. It's basically the most brightly colored bat species that we have in Canada. Very, very beautiful. They're a little bit smaller. They're about 12 grams or 0.4 ounces, whereas the hoary bat, they get up to about 30 grams or just over 1 ounce. So still very, very lightweight. And then one of the more common species and one of the species that hibernates is the little brown myotis. So this is just the skin of it. So that's why it's flat. And those are only about 6 grams or 0.2 ounces. So again, very, very small bats. So bats are not birds, they are mammals. Like you and I, humans are mammals as well. So the babies, the pups that are born, they actually drink milk from their moms. And bats are just really cool in so many ways, but maybe the coolest and most obvious one is that they can fly. They are the only mammal that can fly. And so the name, the technical word for bats is Chiroptera, which is a word that's derived from Greek, and it means hand wing. Now, in a moment, you'll see an image on the screen of a close-up shot of a bat wing. And I want you to look at your own hand and look at that image on the screen. So Chiroptera, meaning hand wing, it literally means that bats fly with their hands. So look at your hand and look at the image on the screen. At the top of the wing, you can see a little nub. That's its thumb that sticks out. They can actually use that thumb to climb things. But then you see the 4 other fingers. You can literally see an index finger and a middle finger, a ring finger, and then pointing straight down is the pinky. They have 5 fingers, just like we do. The big difference is that they are very, very long and thin fingers, and they have this membrane in between so that when they flap it, they can actually fly. And that membrane consists of all these tiny little muscles. So they move those muscles, and they have so much control over flying. It's really, really amazing. Now, if you want to know what a bat wing would feel like, you could actually, be careful though, you could touch your eyelid when you close your eyes. Just very thin skin, and it kind of feels a little bit like a bat wing. It's a little like sticky at some times, but it is dry. It's just like our own skin, really, just really, really thin. Now, another thing so bats are mammals, but they're not rodents. They're not mice or rats. And something that sets them apart is that where a mouse or a rat live a very short life, but reproduce really, really quickly, bats are very different. Though they're small animals, the oldest bat in North America was at least 37 years old, and they only give birth to 1 pup every year. So very long-lived, but very slow reproducing, much more like people do. We live a long life, and we typically don't have as many babies as rats and mice would have. So just super fascinating animals. And then before I pass it on, I just want to quickly talk about some of the threats that bats are facing. It gets a little sad there. So white nose syndrome is a fungal disease that I study that has been killing millions of bats in North America. Bats are also facing habitat loss when forests that they live in are cut down, or when their hibernation sites, caves and mines are destroyed or disturbed. This all harms bats. Wind farms can be dangerous to bats because they might think a wind turbine is a tree, but they don't know that there's this spinning part to it that could hit them. And so there's many, many more threats, and basically all of these threats are caused by humans. Now, fortunately, there are things that we can all do. There's researchers studying bats, figuring out, just understanding the scope of these threats and trying to figure out what we can do. But there's things that people at home can do as well. I won't talk about that. My colleague at the Toronto Zoo, Eryk, will talk about that. But before we'll pass it to him, I'll pass it back to Casey.
Awesome, Jordi. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was really cool to see all of those artifacts that you had. And the hand, whoa, that was really cool too. So before I pass it on to my friend Eryk, I'm going to talk a little bit about our activity guide that we have on the Wonders of Wildlife website. As Jordi was talking about earlier, bats use echolocation. We actually have an outdoor activity for you guys to do at home that is about echolocation. So if you guys are wanting to test out how good your echolocation is, log on to our website and look for our activity guides. It also has things that you can do to help bats. So as we shift over to Eryk, he's going to talk a little bit about what you can do to help bats. So we have Eryk here. He is a bat researcher at the Toronto Zoo. Eryk, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Casey. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to be here. And Jordi, that was an excellent presentation about the bats of Canada and the threats that they face. And like Casey said, my name is Eryk Matczak. I work at the Toronto Zoo with the Native Bat Conservation Program, and I am a bat researcher. Now, because I work at a zoo, you might think that I work with the captive colony that we have of bats, but actually I work mainly with wild bat species, because I'm interested in how their populations are doing right here in our own backyard in Ontario, where I live. So what I'm going to be talking to you guys today about is how we conduct bat research, some of the equipment that we use, and then how you can protect bats in the wild as well. So bat research is actually very difficult to conduct, and it's because of a few of the reasons that Jordi said. First of all, bats fly and we don't. So it makes it very hard for us to keep up with them and see where they're going exactly. Another thing that Jordi mentioned is that they are nocturnal. So they're awake at night while we're usually sleeping. Now in the summer, I'm usually awake at night as well to look for these bats and following them on foot as they're flying away from me. And it gets really difficult. But luckily we can still examine these animals using that very unique adaptation that Jordi mentioned called echolocation. Now, echolocation, as you already said, is a very unique adaptation because bats can see using their voice, basically. And what's really neat is that all bat species have a unique voice that they use to echolocate. And if we monitor those areas where bats are living, we can actually record those voices and then tell exactly what species are in that habitat. So that's the first step in bat research. We find an area that we're interested in, usually a forest or maybe a suburb or some kind of natural area. And then we put out the first piece of equipment that I have here, which is an acoustic monitor. Now this is a Titley Scientific Anabat Swift acoustic monitor. And basically all it is it's a recording device. You can see here that we have a microphone, and then this box stores all the information. Now, we go out into an area that we're interested in studying, and we'll put this way high up into a tree so that we can record the bats as they fly by. You don't have to worry if you see one of these out in the forest at night, because it can't record human voices. It doesn't pick up that low frequency that we talk in. Bats echolocate at a very, very high frequency that we can't even hear, but this device is really good at picking them up. So like I said, all bats have unique voices. And when we take this down from the habitat that we're interested in, we'll take it back to the lab and we will analyze the recordings to see what species are in that area. And that's really cool to see. But acoustic monitoring isn't perfect. For example, it can tell us how many species are in the area, but it can't tell us how many individuals are in that area. For example, we might leave at the end of the night with 10 observations of a big brown bat. We don't know if that was one bat flying by the recorder 10 times, or if that was 10 bats flying by the recorder once. So it doesn't tell us really much about the population size. It just tells us what species are in the area. And so when we're done with the acoustic monitoring and we find an area where bats are present and we want to learn more about them, what we do is we go out into that area and we'll actually catch the bats. That tells us a lot more information than just the acoustic monitoring. And in order to catch the bats, it's pretty simple. We just put up a big net. And this is what's called a mist net. And as you can see, it's very, very thin material. We actually stretch it out like this, which you can probably not even see on the video right now. If I hold it up closer, you might be able to. It's a very, very thin thread. And basically, we keep it thin because we don't want the bats to see it. Bats are really maneuverable and they can see a lot because of their echolocation. They can avoid these kinds of objects, even this thin net. And so to beat that, what we do is we put these nets up in areas where the bats wouldn't really be expecting to see them. So for example, on the way to where they go get food over a stream or a river, we'll put up the net in like kind of a forested corridor where they will likely be flying. The way I like to think about it is, imagine you're hungry and you go to your fridge to go get some food. You've probably been to your fridge in your living or in your kitchen a million times. You probably know it like the back of your hand the whole way to get there. You can do it with your eyes closed. But if we put up a net without telling you, you might just walk into that net and we would catch you. That's the exact same reason why we do it with bats. They don't expect it and we can catch the bat. Once we do catch a bat, what we'll do is we'll lower the net and we'll take out that bat in order to examine it or process it. And we can see when the bat is in our hand, whether it's a boy or a girl, whether it's an adult or a baby, whether it's had any babies anytime recently, and if it's doing healthy. And then a whole bunch of other measurements like its size, its weight, everything like that. And by seeing these things in the hand, we can tell how a population is doing. For example, if a mother is pregnant or she has a baby that's still latched onto her, we can tell that the population is growing. And that's exactly what we want to see in our native bat populations, growth in the population. Now, usually once we're done processing the bat, what we'll do is we'll let it go, and because it has to eat for the rest of the night or go back to its roost. But if we catch a really interesting bat, usually the endangered species here in Ontario, what we'll do is we want to know where that bat is going. Like I said, they fly, really difficult to follow, but we have more special equipment that we use in order to follow the bat. So if we catch an endangered species, what we'll do is we'll glue on this little radio transmitter tag. And it's very, very small. We'll glue it onto its back between its wings, and that glue will eventually fall off within a few weeks' times. But you can see, or I don't know if you can because it's on video, but there's this very thin antenna here, which basically emits the signal every 4 seconds or so that we can then receive using this radio receiver. And this is a pretty big, heavy item that we have to walk around with all night. We also use this antenna which is even bigger, which makes it really, really fun to walk around in the woods. And we point it in the direction where we think that signal is coming from. And then we can actually follow that signal throughout the night. And that way we can see how the bat is using its environment. So where it's eating its food, where it's sleeping for the day. And we'll often be out all night following these bats in these forested areas around Toronto and throughout Ontario. It gets very tiring. We're up until the morning so that we can track these bats. But it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding because we get a lot of interesting information about bat populations and how they use the area. Now, all of this research wouldn't be possible without our partnerships in Nuclear Waste Management Organization and Parks Canada, and even the Toronto Zoo, who gives us a place to work. These partnerships allow us to go all throughout the province of Ontario to study bats and to get an idea of what the populations are like and how they're using Ontario as a whole. And so once we have all this data that we've collected about where they are, what they're doing, and how they are health-wise, we want to share that information. So the number one way is by publishing it in a scientific journal or through reports, but also by sharing it with you guys, like on events like today. By joining Facebook Live, this is the number one thing you can do to help bats, is by becoming a bat ambassador. And so learning about bats, like you already said, sometimes they don't have a very good image around them. You might think of vampires, Dracula, spooky, scary Halloween things when you think about bats. But actually, they're super important to our ecosystems and the world and to humanity itself. So learning about bats is the very first step that you can do to becoming a bat ambassador and telling people about everything that you've learned about bats and why they're so important. Another thing that you can do at home to protect bats is building something called a bat house. Now I have an example here. As you can see, it's very, very big. What we say is the bigger the better, because this is like a mansion for a bat or a group of bats. And basically by building one of these, you can provide some safe habitat for different kinds of bat species that like to live in these areas throughout the summer. Now we actually cut a hole in it so you can see exactly what it looks like on the inside. And it's just a few chambers. The more chambers, the better, because then more bats can fit inside it. And you can also see that it's very tall, and that allows for different climates throughout. So it gets really warm at the top, and the bats might get a little too hot. They can crawl down to the bottom and still be safe and cooler. Now, putting up a bat box, we recommend to do it in the springtime because that's usually when bats are looking for a place to live. We also recommend you put it really high up, somewhere in maybe a tree or even on the side of your house. And those are really good things because bats don't really like to live near to the ground. Now, once you do have a bat house up on your house or on a tree or on a pole or anything like that, it's very important to monitor that bat house because people want to know where bats are living. And if you do get lucky enough to have bats living in your bat house, then you can report that information to some citizen science programs that are available online. Things like Neighborhood Bat Watch, which is a Canadian-specific citizen science program right now, where they work in a few different provinces, but it's basically an online platform where you can upload sightings of bats and report roosts. So if you do have bats living in your bat house, you can do a roost exit count, which is basically just counting the bats as they come out. And you can see on your screen right now, there is the website that you can check out, and you can register and sign up for it. Another thing, if you are interested in building a bat house, you can check out the Toronto Zoo's website, which is torontozoo.com/bats. We have a lot of different resources there about the bats in Ontario, what we're doing to help them, as well as blueprints on how to build one of these bat houses. And finally, becoming a bat ambassador. If you do want to learn even more about bats, check out batweek.org, www.batweek.org. It should be up on your screen right now. And that week is a celebration of bats around the world. So you can find plenty of activities and events and ways to take action to protect bats and to learn more about them, as well as celebrate them in the future. So thank you to Agents of Discovery for having me on today. I hope you guys learned a lot about becoming a bat ambassador and what we do at the Toronto Zoo to learn about bats. And I'll pass it back over to Casey, but thank you so much.
Eryk, thank you so much for joining us today. So as Jordi and Eryk have mentioned, bats are very important species for our ecosystem. So go onto the Toronto website, look out for Bat Week and do what you guys can to protect these bats. They are great pollinators. They eat the insects that bite us. And join us next week at 1:30 p.m. for our Facebook Live. We will see you then. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next week.